Hey. Hey, motherfuckers. Welcome, you fuck nuts. Welcome, you freshmen who are looking for the paddling. This is a MadCast coming back with another podcast live stream. Welcome to the MadCast Live, people. There's quite a lot to talk about here. I mean, my thumbnail is pretty self-explanatory. What I'm going to be digging into for my first video after a long time. Because I think my last video was just, it was titled Nothing, but I was just like, I don't recall much out of that video, but I was just talking about a lot of stuff, henceforth the title, which is ironic considering I talked about as much as I could for my last episode, but for those of you who are watching, welcome everybody to the MadCast, and we're gonna be talking about a lot of things, where I've been these past few weeks or months, depending how the last time I was, live for quite a while, and just hope everyone had like a good 4th of July. Hope you guys did blow some shit up. Had some nice cheeseburgers, some beer, some Bud Light. All the works. What everyone should be doing in this time of crisis. Though, I live in California, so things were starting to open back up, but then we had some new reports that death rates or sickness rates are spiking, so they're going to close up every shop again, so we're back to square one. Just going through my notes because I might forget about these things. I made like a quick list of what I want to talk about. Things have been going well here. Just been busy with work. I still have my day job, trying to keep myself under good standing, and it's usually in a time like this where we're all trying to follow these safety measures in terms of quarantine and COVID-19. You could be treading on some thin ice if you see yourself breaking these rules without even knowing it. Not to your knowledge. And I just got off a shift. Grabbed me a quick pizza, and I just had some dinner before I had to start this live stream. And my OBS might be acting a little funky today because just right now my stream was good, but then there was no data, and it turns out my OBS disconnected itself, so I had to start the stream again, which is very fucking annoying to work with. But I had some things that I was planning to get back to the channel with. I was going to do like a David Stewart style retrospective coverage of all the Transformers movies, the Michael Bay ones. Because I feel like with the Transformers movies, it's deservedly so. They've been cast on a negative light. I mean, what else can people add in terms of just adding to the criticism to those movies? Yes, they're bad. But I wanted to approach them much like David Stewart, how he approaches some bad films or some mediocre forms of media with a very fair voice, talking about good qualities and bad qualities, just step by step. I could talk about why the writing doesn't work and why the writing does work in places. I could talk about the production aesthetics, how it's Michael Bay's, and people are aware of Michael Bay's auteur style, and how it works and how it doesn't. I could talk about the music, which is um, in a generation of forgettable film scores. I find Steve Jablonsky's film scores to Transformers mostly quite memorable. Like I own the soundtracks for ones to four. I think four is kind of a mixed bag, but I do like the first film score. A lot of reliance on Hans Zimmer, but it's just like just sort of like where the style of music was going to before Hans Zimmer fully broke out with the Nolan Batman films. But yeah, I was going to talk about that. I'm going to get this massive gallon of water. Because I do plan to get parched during this. So yeah, I was playing some outlines, some script outlines, some stuff to talk about. Just little by little as I'm like breaking down effects, acting, story, production, pre-production, post-production, and just the impact of each movie, like what it all meant in terms of like the franchise or the Transformers brand, and the success of the films and what that's pushing Hollywood for their own franchises that have come out recently. But I just kind of stopped for a while because I was kind of at that mindset where I was just like, I don't know what else I can add here. I'm just kind of stuck. I'm stuck in my own world. Like, I want to talk about Transformers, but I was just like, it's kind of hard to talk about them, really. Other than the fact that I like the idea that they do exist, that they created this culture, where a lot of people are very negative towards Michael Bay, and they just want like some proper good Transformers, which is what Bumblebee is promising. And I do want the future of Transformers to be at a good spot where we can get proper. I wouldn't really like call out for masterful pieces of art, just like decent popcorn films with a heart and soul, made by people who care about Transformers. But I have been watching YouTube lately, just keeping up with everyone's going, like what everyone's doing in their own channels. Recently enough, I was listening to a EFAP podcast hosted by Mauler's channel, and to my surprise and to my utmost joy, they happened to bring John CJG Graham onto his show, which is something I did not expect. And how the way that whole podcast turned out, I think by far it's my favorite of his EFAP streams, because EFAP's pretty much just him, just basically just talking about just breaking down these bad film essay videos from popular YouTubers, and just discussing films with his friends, and just responding to criticisms, and I really did enjoy that live stream a lot, because one, it's John CJG who is responsible for creating one of the most influential comedies that I grew up with, which is Arby and the Chief. And if you guys know, I'm a huge Halo fan. My first exposure to Halo was with Halo 3, and I've been just riding the wave until I got my full exposure with Halo, with Halo Reach. And along the while, I was always fascinated by Machinima content. Not the studio Machinima, which is no longer with us, and for good reason. But just the format, just the format of that kind of content, where back then when YouTube was just at its infancy, you didn't really know what the future of YouTube was going to be, so you just had like all these back then you had like a lot of amateur style videos. People can make short films and just broadcast them on YouTube. People can make like little reviews with sketches, which is what AVGN came out to be. And YouTube poops were popular. Making like little parody videos out of scenes from classic movies. And yeah, Machinima was just a format where people could make video games out of movies. You can make movies out of video games. And yeah, before like technology took off, where you could just like take a game capture card and you could just record footage of your gameplay sessions. Back then, like that was very rare. Like one of the only titles that incorporated like cinematic playback was Halo 3 with its theater mode system, where you pretty much could just like play the campaign or multiplayer, and you could revisit those sessions in little videos that you can save in your library. And that was revolutionary to the Halo community, and it led to good things with a lot of like fan films and fan fiction content made by people who do love the IPs and gaming franchises that they're making videos out of, which is cool. And so Arby and the Chief was one of those good shows, and I think it's underrated. Like it starts out just like as this goofy, very upbeat, stupid comedy where it's just the Master Chief doll and a Master Chief action figure and the Arbiter action figure, who are like essentially just archetypal roommates with their own different personalities, which pretty much just makes the comedy work. And Chief is a representation of just quite the opposite of what you expect Master Chief to be. He's pretty much just like a voice for every trollish, rude, crude, asshole-ish like gamer that you run into in on like Xbox Live, like multiplayer. And Arbiter is pretty much just like the straight man who plays opposite of Chief clearly. He's like the more intellectual, rational-minded, like the earlier seasons were pretty popular, and I am a fan still to this day. But with John CJG helming like the creation of that show, there were some issues along the way, and that's due to Machinima, where after like the third season, he had finished work, like that he finished writing and filming and producing for Machinima. Machinima wanted to go out their way to produce more content out of the Arby and the Chief, which led to Arby and the Chief in LA. And that was a clear revelation that Machinima had no idea what the fuck they were doing, because John CJG, first off, was not on board with the LA project. They wanted to have their own writers and their own film team to produce more episodes of Arby and the Chief, but with LA, it was just like a complete disaster, like quality-wise, and just without John CJG on board, it was just like, yeah, that vital core was completely missing, and it led to pretty much just backlash for the show and for John. And then John had to come back to fix things up with season 4, which is pretty much just a series of like sketch episodes, but then he was eventually building onto a narrative where by season 5 he was going to construct like story arcs that could take up a whole season, and that carried on from season 5, and currently he's on season 8. And I find like the later seasons pretty underrated, and they do go into some serious, like deep and darker places, more so than the earlier seasons, because it was just commenting on the reality of like gaming culture, and we're pretty much just like people who are what the Master Chief like in-show character represents, like what kind of attitude is being shown in terms of like the online gaming community, the online networks. That ended up being my favorite EFAP by far, because what made it awesome to listen to was the fact how big fans Mauler and his friends, how big fans they were of the show. They were well knowledgeable towards the show and towards the characters, and they've watched all the seasons, which made that discussion felt very rich. And it was cool just to hear John CJG just being a part of that whole podcast. And I recommend it. Mauler gets the criticisms, which are pretty childish, being called the Long Man, and I think he's embraced that name, of course, because I will call him the Long Man. But there are those there are those content creators, those video essayists, those hacks who just call him out for, you can't do this, you can't make 10 or 12-hour videos. That's so awful of you. Oh yeah, like a crime against humanity. He makes fucking 12-hour videos where you guys can be full of shit in your videos. I really liked it. It's 8 hours long. I mean, it's not for watch factor, it's for listening factor. I guess you could probably just, if you have your own like smartphone that allows you to listen to shit, YouTube off the app, then I recommend it. So that was good. I also subbed to Critical Drinker, which is just like a mock name for a critical thinker. A critical drinker is he's a film reviewer, Scottish. He's a Scottish like film reviewer, and I watched some of his videos. And the first one I saw was Men in Black International, and judging from his video and his stance on it, yeah, I refuse to watch Men in Black International. It's a Men in Black reboot that came out last year. It bombed heavily because I guess they were playing to Tessa Thompson's politics, and people caught wind of the fact, and no audience showed up to watch that film, so that film bombed. Another failed reboot in many failed attempts to rebooting franchises by Sony. And I watched some of his other stuff. I watched his Avengers Endgame video, which, like myself, I'm pretty mixed on. Like, he doesn't hate the movie, he likes it, but there are some heavy criticisms that do hold the movie back for being as good as Infinity War, and I can't accept that because I don't think Endgame holds up pretty well under close scrutiny. But it's a good movie. I mean, it's a fun movie. It's just like, it's kind of disappointing that this is like the follow-up to Infinity War, and there were some weird story decisions made. Yes, well, the Child's Play reboot did fail. And I didn't bother seeing that because it just looked like, pointless garbage. But I am a follower of Critical Drinker. I am supportive of his content, and I watched like the first 5 minutes of his Last of Us Part 2 review, and I kind of didn't want to listen to it any further because, no, I'm not in the opinion that, anyone who hates the game is a Nazi or a bigot. I don't like the game, and I haven't even fucking played it. But here's the thing: to play it, I have to pay $60. That's going to go towards Naughty Dog, and there's a long story I have with The Last of Us Part 2, and quite frankly, I'm not going to pay fucking top dollar to play a game I'm not going to like. Which I'll definitely get into later. I'll definitely dig more into The Last of Us Part 2. But yeah, Critical Drinker, he's on my boat. He's definitely going to be one of those people I'm going to watch often. And quite recently, I've been cooking my own meals lately. Which seems like it might be a struggle for people to kill time to make their own food meals. But I'm actually enjoying cooking. I cooked like 4 different dishes for the first time. Like I made like a Cuban meal myself just last night and last week. So it was twice I made the same dish. I made me some spaghetti meat to go along with my spaghetti dish, and I even attempted to make a big steak omelet, like in the style of IHOP. And my omelet story, it was quite messy because I have like this stovetop where the mosquito coil top where it heats up. It doesn't really heat up an entire skillet pan, which made it tricky for my omelet to be cooked. But it came out okay. It was pretty messy, but it was still something I can eat. And I had some short stab pancakes along the side. And during 4th of July, I ended up turning my kitchen into like my own personal In and Out. I made me some home style hamburgers, some cheeseburgers, and I bought this pretty cheap like like steel pot from Walmart, and I turned that into my fryer for my potato cut French fries, and my French fries fucking came out awesome. As for my cheeseburger, I almost had an attempt where I was about to sell myself on tapeworm because on initial cooking, my meat was still a little raw, but thank God it was still thick enough for me to like slice it in half and apply more cooking time on it. And I had some pretty awesome cheeseburgers, and I made cheeseburgers again after the 4th of July, and from my lessons learned, they came out a lot better. But yeah, I've been cooking some food often, because I want to like cook my own meals. Perhaps I could get more girls if I learn how to cook. And I've been watching some movies along the way. I've been on this high with watching a lot of like 80s throwback stuff. Where recently I bought a copy of the Footloose remake, which I will say it's pretty underrated, and I do enjoy that movie. I do enjoy that remake. And so I went back to some films. I watched Dirty Dancing and Footloose '84 on Hulu. Now, Dirty Dancing is one of those films that has gotten like a lot of popularity. It's loved by essentially just like female audiences who have grown up with it and have carried it on for like newer generation of women and young girls who like that film. And yeah, I watched it, and it's kind of a mixed bag in my opinion. It's just I feel like it was just all hype. I wasn't really like sold into the film. I do get the appeal behind it, but it's just like there's a lot of things I was kind of mixed on. But just looking at the film as a whole, it's just like, you have this golf course, this resort, and there's clearly like a class divide where you have like the characters like Patrick Swayze, who are pretty much like essentially like the help. They're like the workers, and Patrick Swayze's like this exotic dancer who does these dance shows for like the resort guests and patrons. And there you have like is it Jennifer Grey, the lead character? You have Jennifer Grey, who comes from like a middle class, upper class upbringing, and her circle doesn't really like. They don't really like support Patrick Swayze's like group or image. And so yeah, like if they were to remake Dirty Dancing today, I feel like the whole class issue should be updated where, the rich and snobby people aren't like snobby assholes, and like, like the lower class, like the Patrick Swayze side, aren't like just like hot-headed like rebels. But I feel like in this generation where it's all about attacking the 1%, the upper class, I think they would definitely fall into just like pandering to people who can't stand the 1%, white privilege bullshit. And then I'm gonna have to bring some light on. I'm gonna get some light going. It's getting a little dark. Let there be light. I'm just gonna get some water. Yeah, it was getting pretty dark. Okay. Yeah. So, and I watched Footloose '84 as well, and I like it. Yeah, ironically, I watched the remake first, so I was just joking about, how, hey, this Footloose, like this original Footloose is good, but it's kind of ripping off the plot of the remake. Duh. And I like that film. I like it much better than the remake, mostly because, in terms of Footloose, the original has a more gritty, raw edge to it, whereas the remake was going for more pulpy, music video style approach to it, considering it was co-produced by MTV. Not that it's a bad thing. It's just kind of updating it visually for new audiences. But yeah, same plot still applies. I like them both. I do think there's more adversity, more adversarial aspects with the Ryan McCormick character, and I think Ariel's more badass in the original, even though. Yeah, I stand for Julianne Hough back then. Yeah, Ariel's more badass in the original Footloose, and yeah, just all the same things are there. It's just people just didn't. I get the Footloose remake having its critics who do enjoy the original more so than the remake, but honestly, they're not bad movies. The remake's not a bad movie, and I really do like the original Footloose. And the original Footloose has it has a more how should I say this? There's a better ensemble cast in the original Footloose than the remake, because I think the remake you do have Dennis Quaid as the priest, Ariel's father, and the original you have Kevin Bacon, you have John Lithgow, Diane Weiss, you even had Chris Penn as Willard, Ryan's friend. And then in the remake, this was a making of a star who was about to break out, Miles Teller. I remember watching Footloose a couple of years ago, and I was very engaged with Miles Teller as Willard, and I felt like this guy was going to go to places, and he did for a while, just not long enough. Van Forsig really screwed his career, and I think with Whiplash and other breakout movies in his career, he did reach a position where he was demanding more money, as the self-entitled young Hollywood actor would. So yeah, that's another sad story. But yeah, I even ended up buying a couple movies myself. I bought Everybody Wants Some, the Richard Linklater spin-off or spiritual sequel to Dazed and Confused. I got Top Gun, Coming to America, and as I did watch the Footloose original, the original Footloose, I just got the movie through the mail today, so that's great. So, to talk about pretty much the subject of this video, I think it's time for me to break down The Last of Us Part 2. So, a few months ago, this all started with a pretty telling omen. And this happened in late April. There was an open statement from Troy Baker, who is one of the lead voice actors of The Last of Us, who voices Joel. And it seemed like with, just 7 years of waiting for a sequel to The Last of Us, it seemed like Troy Baker was going to have a bigger part, as it would seem. So there was an open statement from Troy Baker where he was telling fans and just gamers to be open-minded about Part 2, which Okay, The Last of Us, pretty heavily acclaimed game, well beloved and celebrated among gamers and fans of Naughty Dog's recent projects. Mostly because it has a good story. It's a good post apocalyptic story, and it's mainly just about, you know, like a broken man learning to become a father again, reluctantly but slowly grows to be one as he's smuggling this girl named Ellie across the post-apocalyptic United States, which has been torn by a fungal pandemic and social anarchy, as like all these abandoned cities have been taken over by deadly and vicious survivors and people who are just killing others to loot for their resources. So that's what the first game is, and I love the game, and majority of gamers who have owned The Last of Us still enjoy it today. So that was a telling sign, because to be open-minded, what other reason would you have to be open-minded for if you love the first game? It's pretty much like if Star Wars 77 comes out and they're making Empire, and George Lucas says, I know for people who love the first Star Wars, need to be open-minded about the next sequel. But it's just like, yeah, of course, we're carrying all these expectations on The Last of Us Part 2. We're carrying all these high expectations because we did enjoy the first product, as we are carrying this weight on how the sequel is going to turn out. So, I mean, what other reason would you have to be open-minded for if you like the first game? And that was a telling sign, because a week after that, somebody posted the story leaks of The Last of Us Part 2 just a month before it was released into retailers and digital downloads. And now, 25% of it is inaccurate, but one of the big aspects about the leaks that have been told and confirmed true in the actual game is one of the big controversial story moments in gaming history, because this really has put people into quite a divide, is the fact that Joel, the main character in The Last of Us, dies in the sequel, and he gets killed off by a female character named Abby, who has some relations to a victim to somebody who fell victim to Joel, because there's a big decision-making moment at the end of The Last of Us, which ends in bloodshed, and a lot of people die. A lot of people die in the process, and it pretty much just like subverts what Joel and Ellie were working towards. And there was some more ambiguity to Joel's choice, but his actions did create a cycle where you have this character named Abby who has been pursuing Joel for revenge, because her father worked with the Fireflies, which is like this rebellious faction, and so one of the opening scenes of The Last of Us Part 2 is that Joel gets beaten by Abby, who is presented as like this very excuse me. Okay, Abby's presented as this woman with very overt masculine like physique. Like she's built like fucking Ronda Rousey, but like she resembles more of a male. And that was another thing that set people off, is that the character of Abby, who has been absent throughout like the whole marketing push for The Last of Us Part 2. And it's one of those moments where like Naughty Dog is definitely pushing this game as like, as a crowd pleaser, Like people who like the first game are going to love the second game, and that's how they're pushing it. And it seems like they were just withholding like the more controversial moments like behind the scenes, and that's what it is. This character Abby, who is a character I could picture, which I can understand, a character who is seeking revenge for what Joel did in the first game. That's fine as an idea, but just like the presentation of Abby and where the story leads, it's just like it's a badly written concept in execution, and I feel like we're going back to I feel like this reminds me of a lot of like The Last Jedi, where clearly you have this big, beefy, burly chick in a post-apocalyptic United States, which doesn't really make a lot of sense when you think about it, because you have this world where people are struggling for survival, rations are pretty low, and already you do have civilizations in collapse. So how the hell is this girl, this woman, like with that big of a shape, is able to sustain herself in the post-apocalyptic U.S. And this does take place in like Midwestern America. So because of how she looks, like you have to take like a lot. You have to have those moments where you're not surviving. Have your own workout routines, take supplements, and considering like just her state, her physical state, a lot of like testosterone to build yourself. The wolf are shown to be well stocked with food and an even working gym. I did get that. Well, I did get that through some Twitter user I was debating about like her character. But like like in a world where survival is the most highest priority, and you're trying to fend off like a fungal infection that could just take over your brain in a matter of hours. I just don't buy it, and I think David Stewart just put it plainly. Like how are you able to sustain yourself in this kind of setting? It doesn't come off realistic, especially in the world that we're already introduced to in the first game, because all the women that were presented in the first game aren't as built as Abby. So that was part of the story leaks. And another leak, which isn't true, Ellie gets killed from Abby, which is again, it's not a confirmed plot beat that does happen. But they do something that's even just as stupid as if they were to kill Ellie like that. So yeah, the plot leaks go out, and a lot of people are just upset about this. I, for myself, I was not upset, but I was just like, no, not surprisingly, disappointed, because it seems like with what's been revealed about Neil Druckmann behind the scenes, and the many people who have worked with Druckmann that left Naughty Dog for creative differences. It slowly did reveal. It slowly did reveal the man behind the curtain, and it seems like Naughty Dog, how they were responding to the leaks, because a lot of people were speaking out about this. A lot of YouTubers were speaking out about the leaks, and Naughty Dog happened to have like this investigative, like this I don't know what to call it. It's under Muto Ltd, where they're just like it's like a conglomerate where they were just like flagging people for copyright from using even just the slightest image of The Last of Us Part 2 from the leaks or from their marketing posters. And I just feel like, okay, yeah, you're trying to protect your product, I get that, but when you're like desperate for damage control, that you're willing to silence people because they're just speaking out of what they read about the leaks, it is borderline abusing your power. And so, yeah, just the backlash of the leaks did go on for quite a long time, and it did last it all the way into launch date. And regardless of the leaks, the game sold remarkably well for its first week. 4 million units were shipped worldwide. Now, in terms of video game sales, I'm more knowledgeable with the box office, but I understand like for film box office, it's definitely short term. So a movie comes out and makes its money for like a run around a month or two, or if it's like a big blockbuster, it will definitely linger for longer than 2 months. In fact, it'll take up a whole season. And then that's where you count off your ticket sales, and that's the cutoff point. With video game sales, it's more long term, so there is no cutoff point for video game units. Units for a particular video game will still sell, at least until the next generation console does break out on launch, and then slowly people are going to focus more on the next gen console and the next gen titles. So 4 million copies is a pretty staggering number. Let me pull up here. So I got VG charts. So with 4 million copies sold, The Last of Us Part 2 is already like the highest selling PS4 title. And to wrap up the PS4 run, because we're already approaching the PS5 generation, it is going to hold that title from there on, which is a present feat. I'm not going to deny it. Like in terms of just making their money and the brand, the branding power of The Last of Us, because even if for people who have not read the leaks, they're still fans of The Last of Us, so they're going in with these expectations to ignore the leaks and to just simply buy off the game from retailer shelves, or at least from outside of retailers, considering you can't really like shop at a GameStop normally due to COVID. So yeah, 4 million copies is a staggering feat. It's a good record on Naughty Dog, but there has been news circulating with Geeks and Gamers, The Quartering, and some printed news outlets that The Last of Us Part 2 was meeting like sudden drops in certain markets where they're promoting this. Give me one sec. I got a notification here. Oh, yeah. Okay, as I was saying. So, during the second week, you have reports of like 80% drops. And I have this article here from Spiel Times where in the UK markets, The Last of Us Part 2 did drop a 80% record from its first launch count for sales. Excuse me. And yeah, just on the side here, even in Japan, 85% drop after its 4 million units sold opening, which there is something to be said about these drops, because this kind of reminds me of The Last Jedi with Star Wars, where The Last Jedi had a overperformance in its first weekend at $220 million, and then by its second weekend, the film made like 60 million or 70 million, but it was like a 65+% drop, which is a pretty staggering drop considering how The Force Awakens performed on its first week and second week basis. And what I can boil down to is pretty much with the other markets, gamers across Japan and the UK are not responding to this game on a positive note like they would with the first game, like they did with the first game. So already the leaks, I think people are just catching wind of the leaks. They're catching wind of the backlash. Now, I'm not sure for domestic markets. I'm not sure how this looks in the US. how this looks for Canadian markets. But one of the factors that plays well in Japan is that there's like a very gratuitous sex scene in The Last of Us Part 2. And Japan wanted to like censor that scene, like reissue the game but with a censored version, um, or like some updates on the game to not play that scene for gamers. And I think it was just not just explicit. It was just like again, gratuitous. It was pointless. It comes off like a pointless sex scene. But what this shows here is what does this mean for like what does this mean for like the future of this game? Could this game even make could this game sell like 10 million units by the time the PS5 reaches launch? Because 4 million copies, that is a great number. It's an impressive record. But with these staggering drops across Japan and the UK, what could that mean? What could that mean for the long term? And I think it's mainly because the responses that Troy Baker and Neil Druckmann have made towards the backlash of The Last of Us Part 2. And I will go into these comments a little later, but people aren't responding to it, and I think, and I'm afraid that Neil Druckmann and anybody who was involved in the film, anyone who was involved with the games are not like, they're not giving like the responses that people would want in terms of like buying a bad product. Because some of the stuff I did read about Neil Druckmann and Troy Baker just comes off as like disingenuous and just strawmanning. And it's pretty much like the same result that happened with The Last Jedi, where people like with word of mouth, people did not respond to The Last Jedi as much as The Force Awakens, and the filmmakers behind it are just like making this moral argument by strawmanning people that they don't want change. They don't want like female characters to inhabit Star Wars. They want pretty much just like male characters like Luke Skywalker, which is what we all wanted from the beginning. In Last Jedi, and it's just like what could this mean for the long term in terms of Naughty Dog? I mean, if people are enjoying The Last of Us Part 2, and let's say the PS5 comes out, because a lot of people did enjoy the first game, and by the PS4, by the time the console was launched, people were buying more copies of The Last of Us Part 1 on the PlayStation 4 port. Now, it's I'm sorry, I think my stream had cut off. I'm sorry about that, folks. Can you all hear me? Yeah. Yeah, my OBS did stop on me. Okay. Just want to make sure it was still running. Connection's green, so that's good. Okay. So as I was saying, so with The Last of Us Part 1, The Last of Us Part 1 was released on the PS3 on June 2013, and on a 5-year span, it sold 8.15 million copies, and it was re-released on the PS4, and on a 4-year span from July 2014 to September 2018, it sold remarkably more copies than the PS3 port at 11.78 million copies. So that's 11,780,000 units sold worldwide. It's unsure with digital markets because a lot of people are streaming more often, which means that who knows if people have downloaded more copies than they would buy physical ones. But I'm all for buying physical media in this day and age. But 20 million units sold for The Last of Us. I mean, it just shows that word of mouth was pretty strong with the Last of Us, and that it carried on to the PS4 generation, where people are responding to the game more so. So, what does that mean for The Last of Us Part 2? If it's good as people are making out to be, and I mean like gaming outlets are making it out to be, why is it having these drastic drops? What could that mean for the long term? Could that mean that if the PlayStation 5 gets released and The Last of Us Part 2 gets like a remastered port for the newer console, are more people are going to respond to it, or much less? Because I feel like it's going to be much less people. Now, the game will surely have to break like 10 million units to be a big hit for Naughty Dog. And already 4 million copies. That's a pretty high amount, and already it's beaten Spider-Man and God of War's record for launch. So it's already a hit, but can this maintain that success? Can this all be maintained? And with the story decisions that were revealed in the leaks, what could that mean for the long term? What could this mean for the future of Naughty Dog? How's this going to affect Neil Druckmann's status? How's it going to affect how companies and studios are approaching video games on a storytelling as a storytelling medium? Because I feel like with the backlash, it's just going to, because we're already at the divide. We're not sure if the tide's going to carry over, that more people are going to accept the fact that the game is a bad story, or there's going to be like this retroactive positivity towards it. We're unsure. We're still at this clear divide as of currently. As of right now, we're not very sure. But what can be certain is this game will not sell as much copies as the second game. And to compare this with other games of the PlayStation 4 generation. Hang on a sec. This website's giving me like fucking aneurysm. But last time I checked, Spider-Man as of right now is has sold pretty well from its launch. Now I'm gonna have to check the PS4 updates. Games. See all games. Okay, I found it. Spider-Man. Oh my God, Jesus Christ! I just found you. I apologize, folks. Clearly, I'm new when it comes to this website, but I wanted to have this ready for this big breakdown on Spider-Man. I mean, not Spider-Man, The Last of Us. Okay, here we go. Spider-Man, PS4. Oh yeah, there it is. Right now, it currently stands on 13 million units already sold. So that's more so than The Last of Us Remastered. Which means that the brand of Spider-Man is pretty high right now. It's pretty popular. This came out the same year as Infinity War and Into the Spider-Verse. So clearly, 2018 just solidified how popular the brand Spider-Man has become, which is pretty incredible. So that game's continued going to sell units from this day forth. And let's see where we're at here. So in its first weekend, this game sold 2.4 million. Let me see, am I reading this right? Yeah. So this game sold 2.4 million units, and sold pretty well in Japan. And with 133,000 units sold. So by its second weekend, it did drop 77,000 units. But you do the math. That's definitely like a 50% drop, which is not as big as The Last of Us Part 2. And then you have the UK, 886,000 units sold. And by its second weekend, 426,000 units. So again, that's definitely another halfway drop from its first weekend. So it's clearly people are responding well to the game, and that word of mouth has been passing around that the game's a delight. It's a crowd pleaser. And so remarkably, like with its overall total for its second weekend at 1.1 million units on the second weekend, that's definitely like, I would say above 50. I would definitely say like a close 60%. But that's still pretty amazing for Spider-Man. Now we're gonna look at another game, God of War. God of War, which is I'm not too knowledgeable on the God of War series, unfortunately, so I might disappoint a lot of people watching this. But God of War came out, I think, similarly the same time as Spider-Man. So we're gonna look at God of War. Oh yes, here we go. Okay, God of War 2018. Let's go to the sales chart of this game. What the fuck is my computer doing? There we go. Let's go to the sales charts. So God of War 2018. This was I think this is a reboot or a prequel to the God of War trilogy. And the God of War trilogy has been equally loved by, PlayStation owners and gamers throughout the years that the games have come out. God of War 3 was his highest selling title, at least until now. I think there's a remaster port for God of War 3. So we're going to take a look at this. So overall, this game has sold 11 million units worldwide. First weekend, 2.2 million units. So it definitely sold well in North America at 1 million units. In Japan, it sold 50,000 units, and European markets 6,000. Now this game did had a very steep drop. This is definitely, I would definitely agree. This is Last of Us Part 2 numbers at a worldwide drop point, but we don't really know the North American sales reports for The Last of Us Part 2, at least in its second weekend. So I would say this is a staggering drop, definitely like a 70 or 65% drop. But compared to Japan at 50 million units in this first weekend sold 25 million units. So that's definitely a 50% drop. And European markets, 600 million units, 600,000 units. It dropped off to 297,000 units. So it's definitely, it's definitely above 50%, but that's still a halfway drop. And mainly because people who have loved God of War for its violent gameplay and Kratos as a great character. What the heck? Oh crap, I think my stream is not going too good. Oh, great. There we go. Awesome. Okay, just making sure I was still alive. There it goes again. But yeah, for anyone who can hear me, God of War. It had 50% drops for Japanese and European markets. And its overall total on its second weekend was pretty small compared to its first week. but it still sells. God of War is still a popular brand, and you know, many people are still playing it to this day. So another example I do want to look at is the Uncharted series. We're gonna start with we're gonna do Uncharted 4 actually, which was the last project from Naughty Dog. And keep in mind, this was the game that that Neil Druckmann and Amy Hennig have worked and collaborated on, and there were some creative differences between Neil and Amy's ideas, and that pushed Amy to depart the company. So we're going to see the sales records for Uncharted 4: A Thief's End. But tell me if you guys can still hear me, because I think my stream level is pretty poor. Testing, testing. Oh, great. No, it just stopped. Okay, I'm back on green. So sorry about that. My stream just stopped, but it wasn't OBS. It was just like quality function. Okay, here we are. Uncharted 4: Thief's End, released on the PS4, and I think this had come out on 2016. So we're gonna look up some sales. So this was the last title and project from Naughty Dog, and Neil Druckmann was heavily involved in this game, and that led to Amy Hennig having some creative conflicts on the game with Neil, and Amy Hennig had to depart the company, unfortunately. So, as of right now, the game sells at 16.2 million units worldwide, so that is impressive. Already, I think that clearly takes the game clearly takes the cake as like the best-selling PlayStation 4 exclusive, first-party exclusive. So we're gonna look up the sales numbers. So on its first week, the game sold 2.1 million units worldwide, which is yeah, that's definitely God of War numbers. And when we look at Japan's record, the game has sold over 120,000 units. And with Europe, Europe surprisingly did have a bigger sales launch record than the U.S., than the North American markets, and it sold 900,000 units plus. So that's pretty impressive. It performed better than, well, except for Japan, but for Europe standards, it performed much better than North American markets. And we're going to look at the second week. We're going to look at the second week now. 418,000 units. That is a terrible drop. This is like, this is definitely an 85% drop, at least. And Japan's drop is no different. 20,000 units sold. So, it's clear that with Asian markets, especially with China, in terms of like American media that goes out overseas. I know Uncharted 4 has like a prominent villain who's like a woman of African American descent. And Japan and China markets don't respond to most movies with black or prominent or focus black leads. And while while Nathan Drake is on the cover, of course, I think people who had played the game did not respond to it well across Japan. And we're going to look at Europe. So jumping from a 930,000 units sold. It dropped to 218,000 units. So yeah, these are pretty staggering drops. Well, the game has definitely caught on. It sold 16 million units worldwide, so that's pretty impressive for PlayStation 4 standards. It did had steeper drops, and I think it was steady in terms of its seventh to 10th week of sales. But yeah, across Europe and Japan. I mean, Japan had much steeper drops, but with Europe, it was more. It was slightly consistent after its second weekend, but still having those drops as we see here. So that's pretty interesting to see because what could that mean for The Last of Us Part 2? Will it have much steeper drops? We're not so sure about the North American market sales. We're not so sure about that. Nothing has come out yet. And we're already on our third week of its performance in physical units being sold. But yeah, I just want to break it down because the title I have on my MadCast, the Last of Us SOARS, was actually just like a little homage throwing to Please Rewind when he did his box office addict on The Last Jedi second weekend, hence the title The Last Jedi SOARS, which I feel might be appropriate for The Last of Us' performance in the second week. Because what could that mean? If it's having steeper drops, I mean, it could be just nothing. It will probably sell as much as Uncharted 4, but with the current backlash, and I think some gamers did not respond to Uncharted 4 as much as The Last of Us. What could this mean really for The Last of Us Part 2? If it's getting so much flack for the leaks and for what's been confirmed within the storytelling, Neil Druckmann's politics, Troy Baker's responses to the fan base and to the community, will this have steeper drops? Can this at least sell 10 million units? We're not so sure, but I mean, the signs are there, and it could be possible it may not carry word of mouth well for North American markets and for gaming communities who have already have access to the game, but have probably passed on a word of mouth. Maybe it's not that good. Maybe it's not. But yeah, that's pretty much all I wanted to cover for The Last of Us Part 2 in terms of its sales and comparing that to other first-party exclusives that have sold incredibly well on the PS4. Because one little thing, and I was discussing with Please Rewind about this, is that the hype was there for The Last of Us Part 2, but I never really got the idea. Maybe I did. I thought I did want a sequel, but considering the state of it right now, I'm not sure it was really necessary in retrospect, because I think The Last of Us Part, the first game really let out this, it really introduced this universe that perhaps that you could definitely set yourself up with more side stories, but The Last of Us had a very ambiguous ending, and it was not very sequel pushing. It was just like this ending of moral ambiguity. And I don't know, it's just kind of odd that I don't know, it's just kind of odd that they would go out to make a sequel out of this. But I mean, that's all I really have to say in terms of The Last of Us Part 2 and how I feel towards its sales records and how the game's carrying out in terms of word of mouth. I'm gonna take a little break because I am a little parched. I just kind of want to relax before I move on to my next topic. So I'm gonna use the restroom real fast. I'm gonna drink some water first. So just hang tight. Okay. Alright, I am back. Still parched. There's a lot of air to let out. Oh yeah, Will, you were asking me about National Treasure. I did watch the first National Treasure. I don't remember much out of it, but it was an okay time. I had watched it for like an English class, but it was just like, yeah, it's a movie. I could get behind it, but nothing to remember from. Nothing to remember from. Of course, that was a time where Jerry Bruckheimer was like king of Hollywood back then, with the Pirates films and working with Michael Bay. It's really not as engaging as the Pirates films in terms of entertainment, but I think the first National Treasure it's an okay movie. Pretty silly in that concept. Yeah, I don't really remember. Yeah, that's the thing. Like, I could talk about National Treasure, but I don't remember what the plot was for that, other than the fact that it was a Nicolas Cage vehicle that was a big hit. And I think the sequel did well too. And I think they just stopped from there. But yeah, I had The Last of Us Part 2 just on the top of on my mind because of like the whole controversy surrounding it. Now that it's finally come out and people have played the story. Now, I did say I'm not paying top dollar to play it because I know it's probably, based on what I've read, I'm not sold into it. I don't like the story ideas that are pitched and that they carried out. But I wouldn't mind playing it. I do have a friend who has a share play on his PS4, but I just connected with him. But I don't even know what the hell is he doing lately, because I've been wanting to play it. And I can only get like a 1 hour session of the game, but I haven't really like heard back from him for a while. Because I could easily just watch the game on YouTube, but it's not the same experience. You really need like the immersion there, because that's what gaming is all about. It's just immersion. Especially nowadays, cinematically, it'll just immerse you into the story. I think that's what really matters if you want to like experience it all. But yeah, I'm just not gonna pay top dollar to play because I burnt out and cashed out on Remake 3, and that was a game that wasn't really worth the $60. Now I know there's like more content in The Last of Us Part 2, but The Last of Us Part 2 has a very divisive story, and I feel like I'll probably be as disappointed as The Lost Jedi. But yeah. Next thing I'd like to talk about is there's this whole debacle that's surrounding the Black Lives Matters movement, and that's pertaining to George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and I think a couple unfortunate souls were reported to be dead as well. I can't remember the names, unfortunately, but clearly there's this whole movement going on with like A-list celebrities taking on voice acting, and there are some voice actors who are responding to it. And quite recently, we had some actors dropping out of voice roles because they're like the actors playing these characters are of like white descent, American descent, or some other ethnicity or raciality. And quite recently, I want to pull up this article. This is concerning Kristen Bell's departure from one of the for a character in a cartoon called Central Park, which happens to be created by Josh Gad, and I forgot the other guy's name. He did Bob's Burgers because it has the same art style as Bob's Burgers. But yeah, quite recently, like Kristen Bell had announced that she was going to leave a voice role for a mixed race character, and Central Park was supposedly going to release on Apple TV as like it's as Apple TV's like animated IP that they're launching. Yeah, just recently, Kristen Bell had left the role because she's opening up to the George Floyd movements, and thinks that it's racist that her as a white actress playing like an ethnic character would take on this part. But here's an article I pulled up from CNN, and I'm gonna just read it out there for you. So this is a time. So she states that this is a time to acknowledge our acts of complicity. Here is one of mine. Playing the character of Molly on Central Park shows a lack of awareness of my pervasive privilege. And we're going to read this entire Instagram thread. And this is kind of funny how it starts out. I'm not sure if this is like her saying this because she put her name in there. But I don't know. It could be somebody else. Kristen Bell is an extraordinarily talented actress who joined the cast of Central Park from nearly the first day of the show's development. Before there was even a character for her to play, and she has since delivered a funny and heartfelt and beautiful performance. But after reflection, Kristen, along with the entire creative team, recognizes that the casting of the character of Molly is an opportunity to get representation right, to cast a black or mixed race actress and give Molly a voice that resonates with all of the nuance and experiences of the character as we've drawn her. Kristen will continue to be a part of the show in a new role, but we will find a new actress to lend her voice to Molly. We profoundly regret that we might have contributed to anyone's feeling of exclusion or erasure. Okay. Black people and people of color have worked and will continue to work on Central Park, but we can do better. We're committed to creating opportunities for people of color and black people in all roles on all projects. Behind the mic, in the writer's room, in production, and in post-production. Animation will be stronger for having as many voices, experiences, and perspectives as we can possibly bring into the industry. Our shop and our show will be better for respecting the nuances and complexity around the issue of representation and trying to get it right. Around the issue of representation and trying to get it right. This is the last part that kind of bugs me. Trying to get it right. So that's a very general last statement. Trying to get it right. Trying to get what right? The voice, the perspective of black culture, I don't know. It just comes off as like virtue signaling, to be quite honest. It just seems like, okay, you casted her from inception, but now you're just, because of the whole issue going on with George Floyd and stuff, you're now calling out on it. Because if this is a show that's trying to promote all these voices, they're trying to promote diversity, they're trying to promote like representation, race representation, then clearly this could have been done from the beginning. Because here's the irony. A white actress like Kristen Bell is leaving a voice role for an ethnic colored. I don't want to use. Yeah, I feel uncomfortable using that word for leaving like a mixed race role. But the show itself, it's helmed by two white creators. You have Josh Gad, and you have the guy who has done Bob's Burgers. They're essentially white creators. So how does that? I mean, what does that even mean? Like, they're essentially. I'm not sure if they're like the sole writers. I'm sure they got other writers, but they're essentially the creative voices for the show. So is this? So it's kind of weird because like, I'm not saying like white creative leads don't have a black voice. You have it both ways. You do have black filmmakers, black creators, black creative directors who do understand a perspective of the white side of things as white creatives who want to understand like the black side of things, because you have like Steve McQueen's like an Oscar-winning filmmaker who made a film about a white man going through who's going through sexual addiction and shame before he carried on to making a film centered on slavery with 12 Years a Slave. But it just comes off like it really does come off as like, whoops, let me get rid of these. It does come off as like virtue signaling, like, okay, like now, like out of this show, which has just been, I'm not sure if the show has come out or has it been out for a while on Apple TV, but like now they're just calling out representation to have like more black actors, black voice actors, and writers to helm cartoons, which I think the purpose with voice acting is just one of the stigmas that really hurts voice acting is pretty much just if you want like good if you want black voice actors, hire real talented black voice actors who could carry out on playing characters that you would want, because one of the stigmas that holds voice acting back is, from like the DreamWorks era when Shrek broke out, it's like the over reliance of like A-list celebrities who don't really have voice acting experience, or who have never really learned a thing or two about voice acting and how important it is that you have to put your voice into that character where essentially you don't want people to just recognize that it's the actor playing the character. You want the character to be its own thing. You want to be sure that the character does sound like the actor, besides the name and all, does sound right for the voice and can fit the voice, can embody that character. Which has always been a big troubling thing with voice actors nowadays, because there's not enough like voice actors, like talented voice actors that could definitely do justice playing a character. And yeah, you do have like good A-list celebrities voicing characters we've seen across animated forms of media. Like Tom Hanks and Tim Allen are essential in Toy Story, and Robin Williams was the thing that made Aladdin a success, and love or hate it, I mean, Mike Myers suited the voice for Shrek, even though it was just Mike Myers, but it still worked for that character. Yeah, it's just like, how does this benefit both areas? Like, they're doing this just to be respectful to the Black Lives Matters movement, but like the George Floyd movement is just calling out on police brutality, and they're pushing against institutionalized forms of like racism that exists within law enforcement and systematic like institutions. But how does this contribute to like anti-police brutality, like anti-racism? Well, anti-racism in a way where it is trying to call out for black actors, but you have a long-standing history of animated media where you have like a variety of kinds of actors across different races that have played mixed race characters, other race like characters from other races. I mean, this was this was out of touch with Mulan, but I'm sure people do. I'm sure people do complain about this, but nobody back in 1998 complained that, or Eddie Murphy did call out that he was playing like a dragon in a film with like Asian Eastern culture and influence and history. I mean, nobody called out on that. And you also have like you also have other actors like Jenny Slate, who dropped out of another who dropped out of a voice role in Big Mouth, and yeah, I don't really care about Big Mouth. I think that show looks stupid, as I don't really care much about like most cartoons out there because a lot of cartoons just don't really like engage me in a way as I would nowadays if I were to like rewatch Avatar: The Last Airbender or SpongeBob, or for long running cartoon shows like The Simpsons and Family Guy. They just like completely milk the tit they completely milk the tit, and they're just like letting it run too long because it just prints money. So like these actors who are just dropping out these roles, like I mean, how does that contribute to mobilization against like police brutality and systemic racism? Because the thing is with cartoons, like any other form of media, you just kind of want to escape from your problems, and I think that's what's essential in comedies. It's just like not only is it allowing its audience to escape from everyday problems, but it's just like calling out on the social issues going on, like in satire or taboo. And yeah, you do have people like Matt Stone and Trey Parker who do an incredible job with South Park, who really call out on like pretty much like the social norms and anything that's trending with entertainment, media, politics, institutions, and all that. But like, speaking of Family Guy, and I made tweets about this. I made tweets about like, how I mean, next, like, okay, well, Mike Henry, a white voice actor, voices a black guy in Family Guy. And so, like, there's no way that's ever going to happen. Oh boy, did jinx it, because here's an article with CNN where, yeah, quite recently, Mike Henry dropped out of playing Cleveland on Family Guy. But that's a show that's already helmed by a team of white creatives. Seth MacFarlane is a white guy. Like, who else writes the show? It's not just Seth MacFarlane, but I think it's fucking Christ. I wouldn't know their names too, but Jesus. Yeah, that's likely going to happen. Will, like, people are going to call out on Disney cartoons, calling out for cultural appropriation, for casting like white actors or famous actors playing like characters of a different like cultural influence. That's essentially what's going to happen. And I feel like you can't really stop what's already been said because, quite frankly, like I said, there's a long-standing history where you have like voice actors of different races voicing characters of many races, but race was never the issue. The purpose of like these actors voicing these characters is that they embody the character because they're that talented. Like professional voice actors, if they know their craft, they could definitely inhabit the character, where you don't really call attention to the fact that it's an actor voicing this character. It is the character. Let me see, who else writes the fucking show that has been fucking dead to me since The Simpsons and Family Guy crossover? David Zuckerman. Because they have a different team of writers, and it's apparent because the writing has not been up to par with Family Guy for a long time. A long fucking time. Yeah, Chris Sheridan, Danny Smith, Dan Giannini, like a talented, like a very huge team of actors. And then you have like, you have these guys that, they do American Dad, so that explains why the show has dropped in quality. Yeah, so you essentially have these shows which are driven by white creatives. So with Mike Henry dropping out of the role for Cleveland, and Cleveland's not really like the most like iconic or best thing about the show. He was like he's a serviceable character at best, but I think if they would have dropped Mike Henry, it would have been when the fucking Cleveland show aired and canceled off on that short-lived run. I mean, that would have been appropriate, but they brought him back anyways. So yeah, it's just like, yeah, they want, and you did have like a Cleveland type already in there. I think Jerome, voiced by Kevin Michael Richardson, who is not Cleveland, but like an original character taking the Cleveland role. And Kevin Michael Richardson is a black voice actor who has done like tons of voice roles over the years. Why not just make, okay, if you want to just not have Cleveland at all, just have Jerome as like the Cleveland replacement, for God's sakes. Because you have Kevin Michael Richardson as a black voice actor, and you're promoting black diversity for voice acting. So why can't you do that? And it's just pretty much it's just calling out on, it just feels like these actors are just kind of like dropping their balls off, and they're just pandering to like SJW communities who just cry wolf and cry racism because voice acting is racism. At least with Matt Stone and Trey Parker, like, they never cut their balls. They never lost their balls or dropped them. They always kept their balls. And two white creatives of South Park, they've done voices for hundreds of characters in South Park, especially like impersonations on black celebrities, obviously, and no one called attention to that. So it just feels like it's just like descending into this endless pit of just like just stupidity. Because, and also like black writers, black creatives, I mean, why the separation between blacks and whites? I mean, you have white creatives who have ran these shows for decades, so unless you could get like a Jordan Peele kind of voice or a creative lead like him, then sure, I'm all for it, but it's just like who gives a shit? And this all really happened back in 2017, where recently Hank Azaria dropped out of the role of Apu, and so Apu was okay, I am back. Sorry, I think my OBS did drop off the stream. Okay, so. Yeah, so back in 2017, I think the whole voice acting outcry nowadays could originate back into 2017 with Apu. And this all started with a documentary. But mainly it was just surrounding just like political outcry against Apu, where Apu was just criticized as being like a stereotype of like Indian Hindu descent, like American like individuals who do nothing but run a 7-Eleven or a 7-Eleven store. But really, just off The Simpsons, like everyone in The Simpsons is a stereotype. The Simpsons was just a stereotypical view of a nuclear family. in a like an everyday American town. Like everyone's a stereotype. Homer Simpson is a stereotype of like the working class American dad, and Marge is a stereotypical housewife, stay at home housewife, and you have like a lot of characters like Chief Wiggums. He's a stereotypical cop who eats donuts and is terrible at his job, and there's a lot of stereotypical representations. Mr. Burns is a representation of like the evil corporate white company owner. Like get real. So out of all the stereotypes, well, I guess with Apu, because he is of Indian descent, then he has to matter a lot for a lot of people, and that's what pushed Hank Azaria, because Hank Azaria came out and said like, yeah, I get people are upset with him, but to make those people feel better, to just pay respects to just be respectful to the culture that Apu represents, I'm going to leave the show. Which, okay, I guess just let them win, I suppose. Even though I guess people just I guess the people who make these sort of outcries, these controversies, are people who clearly don't understand the essence of like comedy shows like South Park and The Simpsons and Family Guy, because essentially it's all a comedy. It's not all like, it's not all what your expectations will set out to be in reality. Of course, yeah, there is racism expressed in those shows, but it's pretty much just like calling out on it. It's just calling out on like the common views of what we see now, and we make jokes out of it. But that's usually, if you have good writers behind it, if you have like a good comedic staff that knows this stuff, then you do have a good hit, which is why Matt Stone and Trey Parker have been great of what they've been doing for over 2 decades or more with South Park and their other projects. And I do recall like back then when before Isaac Hayes passed away, Isaac Hayes dropped out of the role for Chef, not for racial reasons, but little did he know what was going on. Isaac Hayes happened to be a Scientologist, and Matt Stone and Trey Parker had been making jabs of Scientology in their South Park seasons, in their South Park episodes, which is far away and rock on, which is good. But then somehow Isaac Hayes gets peeved off, and so he leaves the show. And then, just out of nowhere, he passed away. And so in the episode, Chef dies or Chef returns, they just use like archival voice recordings of all the lines that Chef used throughout his role in South Park. So it's just kind of weird. Like, I mean, it's kind of weird nowadays. Like, the priority is definitely just about diversity and inclusion, which I find very frustrating, because it's just nothing but virtue signaling. But yeah, I mean, that's all I wanted to say about that, and it's really been driving me nuts. Like, this is stuff that, yeah, people who have like love comedies or animation or animated cartoons and all that, I can see why they would lose sleep over this, and I don't blame them. But yeah, this is getting to a point where, like, for modern cartoons or modern media to work, you cannot have stereotypical representations that do come off as sounding as writers will want it to convey. You can't have like terms like retard, or you can't have terms like retard being spoken out, because that's all bad. Or you can't have like this, that, or the other, because it's against everything that it stands for. But but that's the genius with, especially with comedies, is that it's poking fun at controversial things that we could just like take a step back, take a step away from the everyday situation that's going on in society and just kind of like explore what other people have to say. But what other people, and just definitely just exploring what people are just like commenting on in terms of like these social issues, these trends that are going on. But I think I'm gonna have to wrap this up because I am pretty tired. This was a good exercise for me, and I know that my stream quality has been. I know that my stream did kind of drop in places, but I'm very happy that I was able to carry on with this podcast, and hopefully there'll be some newer stuff to talk about. But yeah, that's pretty much going to be the wrap up for the MadCast. And I want to thank you, Will, for definitely tuning in, just listening to the show. And for anybody who watches, if you do enjoy this, you're welcome to just like, comment, and subscribe. And you may follow me on Twitter on the MadCap. And what's next in the future, I am not sure. But I will keep you updated. But okay, I'm going to have to close this off for good. But thank you. Thank you for watching. And if you like this, you may definitely sub to MadCap Productions, where I am here to subvert your expectations by calling out Hollywood, woke culture, identity politics, and progressive political bullshit. And hope you guys enjoy this. So take it easy and have a safe night.